Hello and welcome to the DIY hand warmer instructional video. I'm thrilled that you've decided to have a go at making these, so let's get going. So to begin, you want to take your 2 patterned fabrics and 2 plain fabrics. We need to layer them up. So you can see here we're putting the plain one on the bottom, followed by a patterned one facing upwards, and then the second patterned one we're doing facing downwards onto the surface like that, so you can see that they're facing each other. And then we add the final plain on top. The rest of them will be used for the second hand warmer later on. So you can see it's sandwiched here, 2 plain on the outside and the 2 patterned ones on the inside facing each other. So yeah, that's how it should be. We know that hopefully it'll turn out right. We now need to pin it in place, which is just a precaution. You know, if you were making loads of these, it might be that you didn't need to, but I like to put pins in just to make sure that, especially with hand sewing, it's going to, you know, stay where you want it to, and, well, just avoid movement while you're trying to get the little stitches into the fabric. So there we go, that's pinned in all 4 corners. And the next thing we need to do is get our needle and thread ready. At this point, I would say thread up your needle, but you know, if you haven't done sewing before, then the easiest way I find to do it is to cut the thread first before you put it through the needle, thread it through, and then we want to make sure we're leaving like a tail that's long enough that it's not just going to unthread whenever we do anything. So then we tie a knot in the end as well to make sure that it's secured when it's going through the fabric. I like to knot it a couple of times to make sure that it won't go through, especially when I'm working with thinner fabrics. I think this is quite important. So there we go, that should be quite secure, I think now. There we go. So this leaves us with a nice length of thread here that we can work with. So hopefully we'll make it around the whole hand warmer without having to stop and redo it. Although if this does happen, don't worry, just thread up another piece and keep going, just securing it as you go along. So for our first stitch, we want to make sure that we are doing small stitches. And when you start here, especially because we're going to be leaving a small hole, we want to really make sure these first couple of stitches are secure. Here's my dog who wanted to get a look in and see what was going on. So as you can see, I've gone through the fabric a couple of times, doing a small stitch in the same place as the previous one. This basically ensures that it's not going to just come apart easily, because when when we're turning this inside out later, it puts a bit of tension on it. So there we go, there's a few stitches in there now that I think would be enough to make sure that you're holding the fabric together. And next what we're going to do, we'll just put another stitch in there. There we go. I should note as well, you can see the distance away from the edge of the fabric. I'd say about that is a good level, because we need to make sure that we're going through all 4 pieces of the fabric. So now we just simply sew around the outside. So I would do a small running stitch, doing as small a stitches as you can and as close together as you can as well. This will just make sure that your product is as strong as possible, basically. And you know, especially when we're dealing with something like rice that we're going to put inside it, we want to make sure that, you know, it's not going to come leaking out the sides or anything. And again, now we've come to the last stitch, which we want to make sure is also going to be, you know, strong and able to withhold a bit of tension for later on when we're making the hand warmer. So again, just up and down in the same place a couple of times. And then for the last stitch, what I like to do is sort of do a tiny little stitch in the same place, pull it through until you get just a small loop left at the end. and then thread the needle through that loop. And you can see, here we go, we're pulling it, and it basically just kind of locks itself, which I think is a nice way to end the fabric, end the line of stitch, so we know that it's secure. So the next thing you can do, take out your pins, your fabric is secure now, great. So yeah, make sure they're all gone, do not, leave those in for any reason. And then what you want to do, you want to snip off the edges of the hand warmers here. This basically just ensures that the corners are going to be pointy when we turn it inside out. So do not cut through any stitching. Be very careful that you don't hit the stitches that are in those corners. Leave a good couple of millimeters away from that. But yeah, you just want to remove the bulk of the fabric from the corners, so when you turn it inside out, you're not getting like a sort of a tucking that we can't get rid of. So now we're going to turn it inside out. Make sure that you are using the 2 layers with the patterns on. Do not turn it inside out between the pattern and the plain fabric, or you won't get the result you want. So make sure you're turning it inside out between the 2 patterned fabrics. I have to say, looking back, I probably would have left a slightly bigger hole because it made turning inside out harder, but you know what, it tested my stitches on the side and it proved that they were strong enough to withhold this. So I think, yeah, it was a pretty good job that I didn't skip that step. So just try and push it out as much as you can. Here we go, here is the hand warmer shape, perfect. And now the next thing you want to do is basically use something long or not sharp enough that it's going to go through, but sharp enough that you can basically push it into those corners in the inside and push any sort of bunching out so you don't get like little folds stuck there. This one will show you quite well. There we go. So can you see the corner is pushing out? Brilliant. So there we go. So that is now an empty hand warmer, and that is ready to be filled. And all we have left is the little hole in the bottom of it there, which obviously we need to be able to fill it. So we'll leave that for a moment. And we're going to move on to, here we go, putting together the second hand warmer quick. So literally just repeat everything we've done the same. It's an identical pair. So if you need to go back and look at anything, feel free to do so. I just sped this up so you're not having to sit through me doing it all over again. There we go, secured, corners cut off, turned inside out, and here we go. Here's our empty pair. You could also iron them at this stage if you wanted like a really crisp edge to them. For the purposes of this video, I didn't really bother with this. I was quite happy. So there we go. So the holes are there at the bottom. So now we need to create the filling. So hopefully you will have already got your rice. I recommended about 300 grams of rice here. So you can see me measuring it out on the scales. You could do this by eye if you're not that fussy. You could literally just start filling it and, seeing how fat they go. There are perks to fatter ones. They will keep heat longer, but obviously they will be heavier and bulkier. So that is up to you. You also want at this point to get your lavender, which is included in your pack, and add it to the rice. Make sure obviously the rice is nice and dry as well. We don't want anything going on in there. Here we go, mix it together. So I will say as well, it's a very stinky lavender. So when it's heated up, you will be able to smell it. It may not seem like a lot, but believe me, it is plenty. So here we go. We're going to fill up the first one. I recommend a funnel, but obviously it's not essential. When I first started doing these, I made like a funnel out of paper, which works well enough. Everything got stuck all the time, so I did invest in an actual funnel because it's not something I use myself in the kitchen. But if you got one, perfect. Give it a go and make it a nice, easy process. So there we go. It is now filled. So give it a good squeeze test. Do you want more in it? Do you want less? Totally up to you. So take some time to get this right because you won't be able to add more after we sew it up, obviously. So here we go. Here's my pair sewn up, all ready to go. So now we just have the holes left at the top. So this is the step where I'm going to show you how to close these up. Now, what you want to do here is insert your needle underneath and come up where the stitching starts. So where we ended those stitches, remember we reinforced them, that's where we're coming up. So you can see we're coming from inside, so we're tucking it under the little fold, and look here, that knot is just going to disappear into the hand warmer then. There we go. So now we can't see the knot. And at this point then we need to make sure that we're going to be able to sew in a straight line now across, which basically means that, there we go, so if we squeeze it and pinch it, and we'll get this pin through it, you can see now that that's a nice straight even surface to go along the top to sew it in place. So you can see here that my thread is on the left hand side here. What we want to do is put it in line with it, but on the right hand side now of this hole. So when we pull that through, it secures those two sides together there, and the stitch disappears into the seam, which is why I use this stitch. I think it's a nice detail that you can't see by the end. If this is if you do this well, you won't be able to tell which side you sewed up. So then we go now back over to the left hand side again. Just stay in line with the previous stitch, and so every time you do a stitch you're adding a little bit and getting further down that track. So you can see there we're on the left side, and now we're going back over to the right hand side, pulling it tight. You can see the stitches are disappearing, and you will get better at this. You can practice this, it's totally up to you. It's a great little stitch to learn. It's honestly how I finish a lot of my products off, because I like using the inside out technique to make things more secure rather than having stitching visible. Sorry, I went out of frame a little bit on this one. And there's my dog coming to see what I was up to again. I think at this point I took the pin out because it was getting in my way a bit, so by all means you don't have to keep the pin in if you're happy that you're able to hold the fabric in place. Totally up to you. So here we go, just making my way along slowly. The bigger the stitch, the less secure it will be, so the smaller the stitches you do as you travel along that hole. You can see they've only got a tiny hole left. So the smaller the stitches, the better, the more secure it will actually be. So just continue until you get to the end, and then what you want to do is just do a few small stitches in place. These will be a little bit visible, but not enough you're going to notice them. I just like to do them over one edge, the edge that I haven't just done the stitching, so it kind of seals it up for that last time. And again, pull it through to the end, leave a little loop, thread your needle through it, and there we go. We got a little locked thread there. So that one is now done. See, you can't even tell which side was done. It's perfect. And here we go, so we just need to finish off the second one now using the same. Again, go back if you'd like to see more of that. But once you've done that, here are our lovely finished hand warmers. Pop them in the microwave for 30 seconds and enjoy. So thank you for listening to all of this, and if you'd like to get in touch with me with any questions, please feel free to do so. Thank you.